Welcome to Racing Nation, everybody. This is Yoda. Tonight, we're going to talk to Emmanuel Baako. We're going to talk about all things racing, how he got involved in motorsport, and where it's taken him to in 2016. It's a pretty interesting story. Actually, it's more than a pretty interesting story. It's a damn interesting story. I've known Emmanuel for way too long, and we're going to dig into kind of how we met a little bit as well, because that kind of kicks off his journey into actually getting behind the wheel of a real car. But we met years and years and years ago through simulation, actually. So, Emmanuel Baako, I'm going to turn it over to you for just a second and let you introduce yourself and tell the folks where you're from. And we'll go from there, man. So, welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. It's good to be on. It's been fun listening to you so far, and I'm happy to be on.
Thanks for making it out tonight. I know it's a little bit late for you down there in Florida. Your background is incredibly interesting in that, obviously, not native to this country, basically, came over here to go to school, and then ended up basically getting immersed in everything that was going on for your education, which ended up keeping you here. And now you're based in Florida. You've got a family, lovely wife. Tell Jess we said hi, and a couple kids now. And basically, you're living what most would consider the motorsport dream, man. I mean, how did you get started? Where did the love for racing come from? I'm just curious because your background's very interesting, and I've never really talked to you about. When did you start loving motorsports so much? Because you soak it all up. There's nothing that you don't watch.
Yeah, so I'll blame my dad for a little bit of it. We grew up watching Supersport, which is a South African-based channel, and with that, we get proper Formula One coverage, not like what we get in the U.S., which is 2 hours of it on Sunday, and that's it. You would get the entire weekend, all 4 hours back when, from BBC to ITV, all that. And as a young lad, my dad and I would watch, and I remember the Donington race barely. I don't think I was a big fan. So I tell a lot of people I don't think I was a big fan in '93, but I think I was a fan in '94 when Senna died, because that became a story, right? And so that overtook the racing news, and most of the replays and things started jogging my memory. So we can go as far back as somewhere in '93, '94. I'm just like every other, kid who liked watching racing, Formula One per se. And we just did that. My dad and I, Sundays, times worked favorably for us. Sunday afternoons, we'd watch Formula One, and I always wanted to race. I liked cars, and my dad did. We didn't do any working on cars or anything like that, but I certainly enjoyed watching motorsport, and I did occasional karting here and there, and I was privileged and lucky and fortunate enough to go to school in England for a little bit. And while I was there, while I was in boarding school, I still got to follow along with the motorsport happenings. And so got back to Ghana. This was right after middle school. Got back to Ghana for high school, boarding school again. But this time, every vacation, every chance I got to come home, I was looking for the public go-kart track that you'd see at, say, a fairgrounds or something like that, right? It was just, let's go get in a seat and drive something. There was a little bit of street racing at night here and there with a couple of friends, but, those were the dumb mistakes that you make when you're a car guy.
I think most of us did that.
A little bit of ricer stuff, but I think the real love came when I realized I was coming to school in the U.S. at Georgia Tech, and you start looking around at all the things that you're excited about and things you want to do. Motorsport was always one of them. And knowing that Road Atlanta was right next to Georgia Tech, well, to me, what seemed like right next to it, an hour, I got really excited at the thought, and I came here, like you mentioned, really wanting to race. And Formula BMW had been a thing that I was a fan of, a big fan of, growing up in high school. And so it was basically the path I knew to Formula One. It wasn't I didn't know the whole story of, you start in karting and then you go to Formula 3.5 and you 2.5, 3.5, GP3, 2. I didn't know all that. All I knew is if I can drive Formula BMW, it's basically Formula One. and that's all I knew. And so,
Right.
so this poor kid from Africa shows up, and every dime I have that my dad hoped I would start my life with here, I show up to Road Atlanta one day, and just asking questions and hoping to possibly get, I guess, what I thought would be a seat in the Formula BMW. And then I realized very quickly that I was far off the mark. I couldn't write an email to anybody here asking them for gold exchange or anything like that. That wouldn't work in motorsport today. So I quickly just abandoned that dream and decided to focus on school and go back to the little thing that I knew, which was video games, and keep my racing skills sharp. And I think you talked to Tom O'Gorman a couple of months back, and it's interesting how you mentioned some racing and how that got to be. But with that love for Formula BMW, live for speed.
Right.
At the best. I mean, we had the best physics model for Formula BMW, and we can talk about that for hours.
Yeah, we could talk about that for hours, because I beg to differ, because I think the one that our group of guys created is better. But
exactly, and that's exactly what led to our meeting. Actually, I think we were talking one day, and online or something like that, and it was, you have to try our Formula BMW mod, and it's like, all right, well, maybe I will. And then next thing you know, it's like, oh, I'm with Simcraft, and we'll be at Road Atlanta. Oh, that's right around the corner from me. In fact, I can come meet you. And that basically was it. This was, I think, 2008 or something, in the summer of 2008. And, showed up and hung out. And you and Sean at McDonald at Simcraft, we guess we all hit it off. And next thing I knew, I was getting called to come hang out and work through some of the events. And it was an amazing time.
Yeah, it was a good time. It was we did some very cool stuff back then. Was that really 07, 08? That was that long ago?
I think it was 08. Yeah, it had to be 08 or maybe early 09. I can't recall, but I knew it was definitely before 09 because in 09 I started with NASA. I think I go back and look at my registrations, and I started with NASA back in 09. 09 was my first registration, so I may have started late 08 or early 09.
Wow. Time flies, man. Time flies. You were talking about becoming a real big Formula One fan in '94. I'll just go ahead and say it. In '94, I was 24 years old already. Yeah. I'm an old guy now. Definitely old guy now. But
I'm creeping up there with the kids. It's making me feel older than I think I am.
And you just had another one too, so it's God bless you and your lack of sleep, sir.
Yeah, I don't wish it on anyone, but it's got its rewards. They say I'm waiting.
Well, there's a pair of junior carts in your future, so that's always a good thing.
Absolutely.
Nice, nice. So we've gone from simulation, basically, which is a common theme in the interviews that I do with the folks that I've known for a long time, because the world of simulation is just like motorsport in general. I mean, it's a small world. You meet a lot of people, and those people become friends, and we hang out, and the stories are quite awesome, actually. And you mentioned you started with NASA in 09. Before that, well, actually, no, after that. So you started with NASA in 09. What were you doing with NASA when you first started? I can't remember exactly where you got involved with them, but...
Yeah, so I showed up to meet you at Road Atlanta during a NASA weekend with, Sean McDonald and the Apex 3, and there was a NASA weekend, and so, I had given up on the Formula BMW dream at the time, basically any pro racing, because I really didn't know where that would go, and I completely forgot about club racing, because that wasn't something I had any knowledge of, that anybody could show up on a racetrack and take the car out and just go. I thought you had to go through the traditional channels, go through a professional racing school, and then you have a big ride. So while we were there, I talked to a few folks at NASA, and they said, hey, go check out our website, nasa-fc.com, and we have a volunteer section there, and you can volunteer, and you can drive your car on a racetrack. And so I went home, I looked it up, and the very next event that they were going to have, I showed up ready to volunteer to do whatever I needed to do because I wanted to drive on a racetrack. And think the first weekend I showed up was also at Road Atlanta, and there was a teen driving weekend going on in the Skip Barber Skip Pad. And so I just made my way up there, helped some teens out with the teen driving school. And the Sunday morning, they tossed me in a classroom for corner worker program. And so I sat in the classroom and listened to all this stuff about corner workers, and I thought that was brilliant. I mean, I could be a steward, right? So I was at a corner later that afternoon, and basically from that point on, I worked as a corner worker for the next 3 or 4 years. I think 2011 or so, maybe 2010. 2010, so it was only 2 years of working corners. The opportunity came for me to help in the tower as just an assistant to race control. And so race control, basically, the guys in the tower who are listening to all the corner workers, radioing the calls, making the decisions on timing, when to throw the flags, recording to them for who hits the wall, who hits whoever, all that stuff. The race director generally sits up in race control with the people working in race control. And so I got invited to sit up there. I guess I had shown that I was a decent enough corner worker and I could handle responsibility. So that panned out. And eventually from there, I got asked to do more and more. And I've been involved with NASA SouthEast, from the beginning up until now. And in recent times, 2 years ago when I moved to Florida, I got heavily involved in NASA Florida. And so I handle both regions, from the tower.
It's a crazy path, but it does. The main reason I wanted to have you on is to show people that a lot of people look at motorsport from the outside looking in, and they're a casual fan, and a lot of them want to get more involved, and they don't realize that these opportunities are out there. They truly don't realize that you can literally go to NASA's website and find a NASA region pretty much anywhere in North America and do exactly what you just described. I mean, you can get involved as a corner worker, a volunteer. Through that volunteer program, they'll pay you in track time. And correct me if I'm wrong, they'll pay you in some track time every weekend, right? Am I wrong about that or no?
No, you're absolutely right. So for most regions, it is 2 weekends of working equals 1 weekend of track time, right? So you can't beat that. You really can't. If you think about it, even if you were to translate that to dollars, I think with an average wage of, say, $10 an hour, working 8-hour day, that's $80 a day, $160 per weekend. Your typical track weekend is anywhere around $300 or so. $200, $300, $400 even for a track like Road Atlanta, which is about $400, $450 for a weekend.
Right.
And so you work 2 weekends at Road Atlanta, you wouldn't have earned that much cash at a mindless. It's a very responsible and important job, but not a very high-paying job. Doing corner workers, and you would have earned more than you would have in cash to drive the track the following weekend, and that's tremendous. And I did all this while in college. I didn't have anything else other than go to school, work my part-time job, work with some craft, and on every other weekend I was available. It was a NASA weekend for me, and depending on the region, your room and board are even taken care of. There's food provided at lunch, and Saturday there's generally an awards banquet of some sort, so you get fed, and above all that, you get to be part of the community. You get access to the resources for the same people and things, cars that you'd want to be driving. You have access to those people. You can ask questions and become immensely knowledgeable in any form of driving, whatever the series may be, whatever the type of car may be that you're interested in. You gain so much by being there and having an inside knowledge as to basically the inner workings of the track weekend, right, or the race weekend.
Yeah, and there's not many places you can go to actually immerse yourself in motorsport, get paid to do it from the off. I mean, you literally walk in the door and you're not, like you said, no one's getting rich, but even at the corner worker level, I mean, they're taking care of you for being there for the weekend, which is where you want to be anyway, and you're even closer to the cars, and you have access to the paddock, and you can ask those questions that will help you navigate the waters that are quite confusing as far as buying a car, setting up a car, keeping a car running, we're not even getting into the way that you go about racing, the things that you need to know when you finally get to the track. But it's knowledge that people would pay thousands, if not tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars for typically, and you can just go out with NASA and just become part of the community, and it's all right there for you. It's an amazing thing. I'm gonna digress a little bit again and go back to the car that you were driving initially. Was a turbo Jetta?
Yeah, so actually, I think the first car at the time was a Saturn that I picked up from someone who had autocrossed. And so I picked that car up and with the intent of putting it out on the track because it was a light and fast car, but then got rid of that and got a Jetta VR6.
Oh, it was a VR6.
And
okay.
Yeah, so the first car was the Jetta VR6, so I think that's the very first car you saw. And after some time, I got really excited at the thought of making it go fast because I knew that racing was once again a possibility. And the guys at 034 Motorsport were running a car back in, World Challenge days, in its previous incarnation. They had a turbo VR6 that they were running, so I wanted to build a turbo VR6. And I found one that was almost completed. It wasn't all the way done, and I didn't realize how much work it would be, so I picked that car up with the intent of finishing it and putting it out on the track, and that never went over according to plan, so I ended up blowing that car up before I could finish it, and went back to a stock VR6 once again. But all throughout that process, what I realized was that I couldn't really afford to put my car on track while I was still in college until I knew that there would be an end to, the schooling process.
Right.
And so getting to my later years of college back in 2010, that's when the cars I owned decided to start making their way slowly onto racetracks, everywhere and then. And so there was a Jetta for a period, then there was a Miata. I picked up a Miata. And then after that was the car that we both know and talk about a lot, the FRS.
Right.
And so there was a slight progression there with picking cars that I thought would work, and then I realized it wouldn't, and then I realized I couldn't afford to. All with the knowledge I had from being in the tower. One of my key phrases is, if you can't push it up a cliff, don't race it, because everybody tells you this, and you don't realize it until you're working the tower every day and you're writing the calls down for the cars that get written off and wrecked, and you realize, yeah, I probably can't afford to do that, right?
It's
over some period.
Yeah, and I've seen over the years. I mean, people are on track with their dream car, and they could barely afford their dream car, and then all of a sudden their dream car is gone, and it's tough to watch, man. It's definitely tough to watch. And who ended up with the FRS first? Did we get ours first, or did you get yours first? I can't remember.
You got yours first. We were talking about it, but I hadn't made the financial commitment yet because I still had a working Jetta at the time. It was my third Jetta, and I think after you got yours, I started looking at it, and Jessica, my wife, ended up deciding that we were getting the FRS because you had one, and Jeremy Clarkson said it was okay.
Yeah, I'm definitely the reason why you bought it. I know that for a fact.
Yeah, exactly.
That was sarcasm. That was deep sarcasm. It is. I mean, it's a fun car. It's definitely a fun car. But you bought yours, and you're like, it's my daily driver, and I was like, well, that makes perfect sense. Mine's my daily driver, and I'm going to autocross it, and I don't know whether I'm going to build it for stock class or whether it's going to end up STX or whatever. I was going to autocross mine, and you were like, yeah, mine's just a daily driver, and then all of a sudden I got a phone call one day, and you were like, I started gutting it, and I was like, what did you start gutting? And you sent me pictures, and it was like your daily driver you would completely pull all of the interior out of, and you're like, yeah, I'm getting a cage built. Okay. So that's kind of where the real door-to-door thing started happening for you. And that's, how long ago was that? When did the FRS come out? Was it 13?
Yeah, it came out June 12. You picked yours up probably end of the year 12, right?
We had one of the first ones in Birmingham. I know that. It might have been
Yeah,
the first
yeah.
one in Birmingham.
Yeah. So yeah, you might have got yours, July or August 12, I think, or maybe even earlier. But yeah, we picked mine up early 13, and the goal was to have it completely paid off in 2 years with whatever the balance of the car when I picked it up was. And my wife got pregnant, or we found out she was pregnant somewhere around 8 months or so into owning the car. So late 13, we found out she was pregnant. And that plan got quickly accelerated because as soon as she found out she was pregnant, one of her few comments was, "I can't get in this car once, I have a belly." And I was like, "Oh, great. Well, no problem. You can't get in. It's got no purpose to you. Race car time." That's really how that started. So yes, I did start karting it really early, and having worked in the tower and being privy to all this, I just wasn't willing to push the car until I had a full roll cage in it. And not everyone has the the liberty and can make those decisions, but I was in a position to make that I'm not going to drive this car hard on the track unless it's got a full cage in it. So putting the cage in was as much so about being safe as it was about going wheel to wheel, right? And that's really how that happened. It's like, well, it's no use to her. I've got a year left on this. Let's accelerate that. Let's start getting this done. And the day it's done, the day it's completed, that's the day it's going to be completely off. And that's how that worked.
And then things escalated from there, and you started looking at it as potentially a catalyst for Spec FRS or Spec FRS BRZ, I guess. Did anything ever really get going with that, or are you one of the few that was actually running an FRS as a full-blown classed car in NASA? I don't know how many of them are out there, to be honest.
So by my last count, there are 7 that have run with NASA. I did do a pretty good job early on of keeping track of all the cars that were running in the country that were caged and competing on wheel to wheel, even though some were running with other sanctioning bodies, just because I was trying to find out what we could do to build a national spec class. Spec 86 became sort of the accepted name around some circles. But yeah, I mean, it's with NASA, one thing that NASA does really well is allow anyone to bring any car to race, and there's already a really good existing class for that car, where that car, in fact, has been termed a class killer by some few, because the car does really well there. With a car being so new, and the things that make a spec class exciting are large numbers of people in the same class with good competition, and everybody being on the same, level field. Well, the car isn't exactly cheap still, right? It's still a new car. It's only been out for 4 years thus far. And, most people will tell you cars start dropping in value significantly around the 5 to 7 year mark. And so as it relates to NASA, when I brought this up for conversation, we've all kind of accepted and agreed that, we should just hold off until the car really drops in value somewhere around 5 to 7 years. But in the time being from that discussion back in 14 until whenever that time actually pans out to be, we want to go ahead and keep an eye on things and look at who's driving what they're running to, what some of the known issues are, if it's even cost effective for a spec series, because this is not the first car that has come out and proven to be fun, and not all cars have spec series, right? So, what makes this car so good for a spec series at that price? And it took off for a little while with the conversations, and NASA as an organization is willing to entertain the idea. We just need to wait for a certain duration. There are a few individuals who have taken the lead in trying to create something locally, right, or regionally amongst their competitors. So if you have 2 or 3 cars and they're all friends, kind of to talk everyone into buying the same thing. That way you essentially have your own local spec series. So that's sort of what's going on now. And I have a feeling in the next 3 or 4 years, we'll definitely see something coming out for this car in the U.S. Other countries have it. Germans have the VLN, where they have a spec car. Most of Europe has another spec series. Australia and New Zealand have a spec series there. But those countries have more of a backing, a motorsport backing, whereas TRD USA wasn't really interested in doing an amateur backing for this car, other than the celebrity race that they do at this time.
Right.
And so, in due time, those things would all shake out. But as of now, there isn't anything properly sanctioned in the U.S. for a spec series for the car.
I got you. You talk about the celebrity series. I had heard that was actually not going to happen at Long Beach this year, and then all of a sudden there it was.
Yeah, this was the last year for it, and so there should be no more pro celebrity race with any Scion or Toyota cars happening ever again. As disappointing as that is, that makes me excited, because I know in 5 to 7 years from now, those cars will all be school cars or school training cars in the West Coast, and they'll be available to pick up for very, very cheap.
I hope they are. I hope those aren't non-VIN cars. If those are non-VIN cars or considered to be like the cars that the manufacturers can't sell, I hope those cars don't get crushed.
Yeah, I hope so too. In fact, one of my competitors in NASA SouthEast, Jeff Williams, he's been running the Cameron Diaz Celica from 2005, I believe.
Right.
Maybe slightly later than that. But he's been running that car, the same car that she drove in the celebrity race, and he's got the picture of her by that car, right? And so we have that connection, and we have a way to get to those people who end up with those cars from the celebrity race. So fingers crossed, it's still early days. Give it a couple of years, and we'll see what happens. No need to jump the gun right now.
Definitely. Let's talk about some other stuff that's going on within NASA. I mean, that was honestly the biggest reason that I wanted to get you on, was to get a little in depth about the NASA organization. And we talked about your rise from basically just wanting to be involved to walking in. They put you through corner worker school. You did that for a couple years. You showed some initiative. They brought you into the tower. All of a sudden, you're race director. You're running race control in the tower, and I've known you long enough to know that you absolutely love it. All of that is well and good. The path is set. You're doing amazing things there. But the NASA sanctioning body as a whole it seems to me, they keep drawing more and more people into race with them year over year. And it seems to be growing faster than any other club racing sanctioning body that I know of.
Absolutely.
And I think that's in part to two things. I think it's in part to the atmosphere that they create at the track. And also, it has a lot to do with the classing system that you were talking about earlier, and the way that they go about pairing cars with other cars and balancing performance, and then the variety of spec series that NASA has chosen is very unique. It's unique, and I'm curious as to the thought process, and I don't know whether you can provide insight on this or not, but the thought process that goes into creating that balance of performance within different marks, and then saying, okay, well, Spec E30 makes a lot of sense. We're going to build that. And then it's just massive. Spec E30 is, I think, probably second to only Spec Miata as far as the number of cars that are out there on the planet for a club racing spec class. Am I right in thinking that, or am I wrong?
No, you're pretty close to it. I mean, without punching out numbers, it'd be tough to say 100%. But let's see. I think in March we had 35 cars in Spec E30 at Road Atlanta for a regional event.
Right.
Yeah, that's just one class, right? So no, you're certainly right there. I mean, NASA as an organization. Let me kind of start off by saying, I love all my friends and all the other organizations, and nothing against anybody else, and all that, but
no, not at all. I mean, I autocross with SCCA.
Initiatives are being made. Hayward is doing really well, trying to push a few things with SCCA starting line and all those things. But The atmosphere that NASA creates is second to none. The leadership at NASA makes it a point to ensure that when you come to a NASA event, you leave knowing that you're welcome, right? And that's something that I can say for a fact, that I didn't feel that at 2 or 3 of the other sanctioning bodies that I visited during the early phases of realizing that I could go club racing in the United States. And so, I think a common term is it's cliquey or something like that, right? In various other places where NASA is never like that. So that's been, I think, the biggest draw. Anybody who shows up at a NASA event finds this amazing atmosphere that draws you in, and NASA allows, whatever car you have, we have a place for it. Your car may not be the most competitive in that class, but there is a place for it to race. And then you can decide your commitment level. Because you go to hang out with your track friends, and there's a party, and then there is some racing, right? So that's one thing. It's pro racing in the name, but really it's about a group of friends who get together with a common interest, having the best time of their lives over a weekend once a month, right? That's what NASA provides, and that's something that you unfortunately don't get with, say, the SCCA regions that I've been to, right? If I've gone to an SCCA event, I felt like this was a ladder to some pro racing, and there's nothing against that. I mean, for those on that right path, that is absolutely welcome. However, if you want to go out to a club event and have the best time of your life over a weekend, thus far, I haven't found any organization that does it better than NASA. Really.
Yeah, I hear you. And to me, the NASA club racing aspect, or that family aspect, I found that in SCCA autocross. And and I'm not saying that SCCA club racing, there's going to be good and bad in everything. I get it. I totally get it. But there's a family feel with NASA that is, I agree with you. It's very inviting, and you make it easy for people to come in and figure out what their niche is. Whereas I have seen in other organizations, whether you want to work or race, they make it as hard as they possibly can for you to actually figure out truly where you want to be, and that's just not the case with NASA.
Exactly. That's a very good way to put it. Yeah, absolutely.
So let's get into. I mean, I don't know whether you know or not. I mean, you run race control, and you are the series director, I think, or class director for a couple different classes, depending on where you're at. Do you have any insight into how NASA goes about their balance of performance? How NASA goes about choosing? I know that there's Spec E30, and now they're running E36s and 46s now in Spec classes too, correct or no?
Yeah. So the E36s came about with a spec class for Spec 3. This was sort of a combination BMW, Club of America. The Spec 3 hasn't taken off nationally in the same way Spec E30 did. It's kind of, located in a few regions. Mid-Atlantic has a good core group of Spec 3s, whereas in places like the Southeast and Florida, there aren't any Spec 3s. And in recent times, the last year and a half, almost 2 years now, Spec E46 for the E46 chassis has also kind of come about, and that's growing in large numbers. Once again, concentrated in certain places. So the East Coast, Mid-Atlantic, Southeast, Northeast is building one now, building a small contingent. So that's got a really, really good backing there. And then in the Pacific Northwest and on the West Coast, we've got huge numbers of Spec E46s. So, how NASA picks these classes they know will grow and succeed, unfortunately, I do not have any insight on there. Depending on what specific class we're talking about, I may be privy to some information about how the balance of performance happens, right? So I race in a class called Performance Touring, and within that Performance Touring, we have various levels of, based on lettering and numbers, just like you would have TCA, TCB, things like that, right? So we've got that for Performance Touring, and I do have good insight on how balance of performance is handled within those classes. Same as our Honda Challenge classes with HC1, HC2, HC4. It just depends on the class, right? There are a good number of classes. Once you want to accommodate every car, make, model that's been sold in America, you kind of have a lot to play with.
You definitely do. And you mentioned Honda Challenge, and if you've got any, I'm curious how because I know the guys at HMA quite well, and how do you balance the performance with a Honda Odyssey, with Accords and Civics and Integras and it actually, I mean, it's great racing, and the guys at HMA, they're amazing, and that Odyssey is absolutely incredible, and I'd give you a pinky to get back behind the wheel of one of those things. But I know it's power to weight, and then there's modifications. But doesn't NASA have a point system that you work with, or is that just the NASA Autocross that I'm thinking? Does that work in the road racing as well? I'm just trying to think of how do you know how much stuff you can do to an Odyssey versus an Accord and race them in the same class and the performance be kind of balanced. Can you talk us through that or no? Or is it just not your gig?
I can speak to a lot of time and effort and commitment to making our customers happy, right? That's really what it boils down to. Lots of testing, lots of data gathered, lots of discussions between those people with those cars, the series directors from the various regions providing their information. When we talk about Honda Challenge, for example, and I won't go too in-depth with just Honda Challenge, fun fact, by the way, while I segue for a second, all the HMA guys did get their comp license through NASA SouthEast because they always show up with the pilots and the Odysseys, right, and they race alongside them. And I have people laughing at me if I get overtaken by a minivan. So that's always hilarious.
I got to drive their older versions of those minivans, and I'm assured that the new one's even better. But anytime anyone sees a Honda Odyssey, they should point to it and say that's a race car. Those chassis are so good. They're so good. And no one realizes it. Segue complete. Go back into the balance of performance. Sorry.
So there are, there are various, if you're a Honda guy, the K20, the K24s, and all these crazy numbers that they throw out with the chassis and all those things. And the people that were involved in Honda Challenge, initially, it was basically a bring what you got. If you got a Honda, bring it, cage it, let go. But over the last 10 years or so, they've been able to refine it, and knowing what motors perform in what ways and how the weight works. There are no points associated with Honda Challenge. It's just limitations as to what you can do based on the chassis, those sorts of things. In performance touring and super touring, there are sort of modifiers, right, associated with various things. So in performance touring, for example, we'll take my car, for example, the Scion FRS. It has a base classing based on the car's power to weight from the factory and some testing done by a number of test drivers. There's a base classing given to the car. And then from that point on, the base class, and for that specific example, is Performance Touring D. You're allowed 19 points of modifiers. So think of your Need for Speed or Gran Turismo, where you can buy parts and each part has a point.
Right.
So, an intake is a 1 point, whereas, you put on the base class tire compound width for Hoosiers is 10 points, or you can run a smaller width tire and get some points back to spend on other things. You can go spend 7 points on a wing and, a front splitter, those sorts of things, right? You can spend points to make your car perform a little bit better, and various cars will respond differently to those modifiers. And so even with the various base classes that various cars fall into, people will spend points on different things that impact their car differently. And that's really where it all stems from, right? There are points allowed, you can spend points here, and they're really closely matched. If you were to put, one pro driver in all the cars we have, you'll find some flaws in the classing system. I won't deny that. However, as a whole, the disparity in performance based on, the club races we have and the results we see week to week from all the NASA regions shows that it's a system that works. The most challenging part of all of it is really enforcement of the rules. You're not going to tear somebody's engine apart to make sure that they have, the specific valve spring that they're allowed to use that gives this, lift in a normal regional race. So enforcement of those things can sometimes be difficult, but as a whole, the balanced performance system that exists within, say, the super touring system and the performance touring system really works well, and it's always being improved, week in, week out, year on, and so forth.
Right, and if somebody wants to go racing within NASA, it's the paddock is. I'm not going to say it's a completely open book, but it's damn near that. If you have a particular car that you're really interested in turning into a race car, or where there's a car sitting that's already a race car that may not have ever ran in NASA before, show up in a NASA race and go, hey, I'm thinking about doing this. And you'll probably have 10 people in the same class go, yeah, if you want to run up front, you could do that, but if you want to run up front, you need to do this. And they're literally, like they want you racing there so bad just because they want more cars on track. They want more people to go out there and trade, well, I'm not going to say trade paint because obviously banging fenders is frowned upon everywhere, but they want you out there going wheel to wheel with them because the more the merrier, basically. It's a very, it's an open atmosphere, I'll put it that way. And I have seen that, and it's definitely something I'd like to explore with the Camaro Mustang Challenge Camaro Mustang Challenge Camaro sitting in the garage, but no time to race it. And it's the car with no home now, considering we have a 400 horsepower 305 under the hood, which those two things should never be put together in a sentence, and that's a topic for another time. It's an interesting car. It's a very interesting car. But yeah, I definitely want to get out and play with you guys, man. I love the organization. I love the fact that someone that I've known as long as you and someone that I consider to be just an incredible friend and part of the family. I love the fact that I met you and you had never raced before, and then all of a sudden it was like 2 or 3 years later you were like, oh yeah, and by the way, I'm building a race car and I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and it does go to show that you don't need to have, $500,000 or $1 million in the bank to actually get out on track and live it. You've built it from nothing, and it's been very cool to see you do it. And kudos to Jess for putting up with all of your crap, sir.
Yeah, I like to think I'm extremely fortunate, and I'm going to hang on to that for as long as I can.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That's definitely a good idea. We're about ready to run out of time in this segment. We've got about 2 minutes left. I want to turn it over to you. How can people get involved with NASA? Where do they need to go look for you? How can they find you online? And where do they reach out to in order to get involved?
Yeah, so just Google, NASA Pro Racing, or NASAProRacing.com is the website. That's it. Just go to NASAProRacing.com, and the website was redesigned about a year and a half ago or so. And on the right side of the site, just select your region, and you'll find a regional site. Or if you don't even know what region you want to be part of, you just want to find information about a car or anything like that, just select the racing series, and you should get all the information you need. It's all up there. Find an event coming up close to you. Once you select a regional site or you sign up or register, the site puts up upcoming events in your selected region right in front of you on the bottom left every time you log into the site. So you're able to see, oh, well, I'm available next weekend. Guess what's happening? There's an event at this track, and just show up. It's really that simple.
Right.
Show up, even if you just have an hour. Just show up, walk around in the paddock, talk to a few folks. It's the most inviting paddock you'll find anywhere, and ask away, because like you've alluded to, we want more people racing. Racing is, the more the merrier, right? You have more fun. The fast guys want more fast guys to play with. The mid-pack guys want more mid-pack guys to play with. And even the slower guys are happy to tell you everything they know and everything they've learned from the fast guys.
Right.
Because until you get up there to the front, by gosh, that's one more person that maybe they'll get a chance to race with for a good period of time before you all progress. And you never know when you'll form lifelong bonds.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. That's what it's all about. And I've been talking to Emmanuel Baako. He's with NASA Florida, NASA Southeast. Go check him out. This has been Yoda. This is Racing Nation. Check us out all over the web, racingnation.com.